I woke up one Saturday to the sound of engines where there shouldn't be any. Not tractors, not a neighbor's mower, but the steady rumble of cars, and that sharp chirp when somebody locks an SUV with a smug little beep. I pulled on boots, opened my front door, and just stood there a second trying to make my brain catch up with what my eyes were seeing, because my east pasture, the one where I rotate the horses when the rye starts coming in, had turned into a parking lot overnight. My gate chain was cut clean like a breadstick, the crosstie lay in the dirt, and a dozen cars sat nose to tail in the grass under a hand-painted sign that said Sunny Meadows Overflow Parking. That's when my phone buzzed, like the universe wanted to go ahead and make it official. A woman in yoga pants pointed at the pasture like she was explaining the obvious to a child, and said, "This is the overflow, the HOA emailed us." And then she tossed a bag of groceries into her trunk and told me to take it up with the board. Board of what? I asked, trying hard to keep my jaw from doing something that would make the evening news. The Homeowners Association, she said, like the word association, gives you the right to put your tires wherever feels convenient. Let me back up a second. I'm Jack Reynolds. My granddad bought this place when this county was mostly fence posts and church steeples, 15 acres of grass and oaks, and one long dirt road that stays muddy 3 days longer than it should after every rain. I left for a while, came back after Dad passed, and I've been keeping the place going ever since. We're the last big open parcel in a sea of cul-de-sacs now, which is fine by me. Horses like quiet, and so do I. Then Sunny Meadows went up on our east line. Country living, city convenience, which apparently means narrow streets, tiny driveways, and enough granite countertops to blind a man at high noon. Folks moved in, nice folks mostly, and the first month was all casseroles and new mailboxes. The second month was cars. At first it was just the road that runs along my fence. Technically public, practically private because I grade it and fill the potholes myself. I let it slide because life's too short to fight every pickup that can't fit in a driveway. But then I started finding beer cans under my fence, fast food bags in the ditch, and hoof prints where the horses had spooked at something they shouldn't have. I put up a couple no littering signs, figured we'd all settle into a rhythm. Then I got a letter. It had the HOA logo on top, tasteful serif font that thinks it's a gavel, and it said I was in violation of improper land use, unsightly equipment storage, failure to maintain property to community standards. I read it twice, looked down at my own name and parcel number, and laughed out loud because it had to be a wrong address. I called the number and a man introduced himself as Doug, HOA president, voiced like that guy who tries to sell you a warranty you don't need. "Hi, Doug," I said. "Jack Reynolds here, the ranch to your east. You sent something to me by mistake." "Not a mistake," he said, and I could hear the smile, the one that doesn't touch the eyes. "Your property borders our community and affects our property values. The board has determined that your ranch qualifies as adjacent common land subject to our bylaws." I actually had to set the phone down, just for a second, just to let that sentence hang in my kitchen like a fart and see if it dissipated. "That's not how any of this works," I told him. "My family's owned this land for 70 years. We never signed into your HOA. You can't vote me into it because your streets get crowded on weekends." "Mr. Reynolds," he said, the smile getting thinner, "our legal team has reviewed the situation thoroughly. You have 30 days to correct the violations or face fines." "Doug," I said, "don't send me any more letters." Then I hung up and went back to repairing a gate latch that actually mattered. 2 weeks later, I pulled up from town with fence staples and feed, and there were the cars in the grass and the lock on my gate lying in two polite halves like someone had performed surgery. That's when I called the sheriff. Deputy Wilson rolled up, hat low, dust trailing off his cruiser like a veil. He knows me, knows this place, didn't need convincing. He took pictures of the cut lock, the sign, the license plates, and started writing trespass tickets as folks came trotting out to play musical cars. Most of them were embarrassed, apologizing before I opened my mouth, and one nice guy showed me the email right there on his phone. "Good news," it said. "The board has secured additional community parking adjacent to the eastern entrance." Not a word about private property. Not one hint of a deal. Just secured, like they'd wrestled a mountain lion and put it in a leash. We filed a report for the vandalized gate and the trespass. I hung a heavier chain and a lock that belongs on a ship, and I put up no trespassing signs every 20 feet like it was the world's most boring art installation. The next morning my phone rang again. Reynolds, what's the meaning of this? It was Doug, mad that his residents had been ticketed for parking on my pasture. The meaning, I said, is you encouraged criminal trespass and somebody cut my lock. You're named in the report. You'll hear from my attorney. He snapped something about easements and hung up. 3 days later, he made good on that word. I got a certified letter from a firm called Goldstein and Associates claiming my field was subject to an easement for community use. They cited some dusty case law that probably lives in the same drawer as a monocle and a pocket watch, threatened legal action if I continued to obstruct community access. I drove that letter straight to Maria Gonzalez, who handled my dad's estate and knows where every survey pin is buried between here and the river. She read it once, eyebrows up, then laughed in that lawyer way that's not really about humor so much as oxygen. This is nonsense, she said. If there was an easement, it would be recorded. There isn't. They're trying to scare you into compliance. She drafted a response that felt like a cold shower. Respectful, firm, and very clear. No easement exists. My property is not and never has been subject to their bylaws. Any further attempts to access it will result in civil action for trespass, harassment, and fraud. We sent it. I exhaled, and I told myself we'd finally reached the part of the story where people come to their senses. 2 mornings later, I woke to the sound of a diesel engine working hard, the kind of low growl you feel in your ribs. I stepped onto the porch in yesterday's jeans and a t-shirt, and there, inside my fence line, a small bulldozer was shaving my pasture flat like it was prepping for a Walmart. A fresh sign was staked in the dirt, Sunny Meadows resident parking, and the operator was as happy as a man can be while running someone else's machine on someone else's Saturday. I waved my arms, and he eased the blade down and cut the engine. What do you think you're doing? I asked, and I could hear my voice aiming for calm and hitting something closer to the speed bag at a boxing gym. Following orders, he said, honest and plain. HOA contracted us to grade a parking area. We've got permits. He climbed down and handed me a folded stack of paper. A county permit for improvements to community common area, property owner listed as Sunny Meadows HOA. Address massaged just enough to make a clerk nod and stamp. This is my parcel, I said. You've been lied to. You need to leave now or you'll be leaving in handcuffs. Sheriff's on the way. He looked at the fence, at the pasture, at the sign they'd pounded into my dirt, and I watched the math run through his head. I don't want trouble, he said, and backed the machine away from the fresh scar he'd cut. That's when a black SUV rolled up, clean as a dentist office, and out stepped Doug in a golf shirt and loafers with the soles still white, and a woman in a dark suit carrying a handbag that cost more than my hay budget. Mr. Reynolds, he said like we were old friends who simply had a funny misunderstanding. I see you've met our landscaping crew. We're implementing the community improvements we discussed. We have never discussed anything, I said. You obtained fraudulent permits by claiming to own my land. There's a deputy 2 minutes out, and my lawyer's on the phone. The woman stepped forward, hand extended like a peace flag that came with billable hours. Jennifer Goldstein, she said. As we explained, there is an easement. No, I said, because sometimes you have to make the word a wall. There is no easement. You made that up. And what you're doing is criminal trespass, property damage, and fraud. The smile slid off Doug's face, and something hard got visible in his eyes. There's no need to be difficult, he said, and you could hear the threat in how polite he made it. Our community needs this parking, and your unused field is the perfect location. We're prepared to offer a nominal fee for the inconvenience. My answer was still no, just with less sugar. By the time the blue lights rolled in, the nozzle on the bulldozer's diesel tank was clicking shut. Deputy Wilson took statements, photographed the fresh track marks, copied the permit paperwork, and made it clear they were all to leave immediately. He couldn't adjudicate the finer points of the permit on the spot, but he could say unequivocally that I was the legal owner of the dirt under our feet and nobody had permission to grade it. The bulldozer operator apologized again, and I almost felt bad for him. He was a pawn who'd been told he was a rook. Doug and Ms. Goldstein retreated with a promise that I'd regret this obstruction, which I wrote down verbatim because Maria loves that sort of thing. On Monday, Maria filed for an emergency injunction, a temporary restraining order that said, in legalese with sharp teeth, do not set foot on this property, do not touch a blade of grass, do not send a contractor, do not even breathe this way. She also filed a civil suit against the HOA for trespass, property damage, fraud, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. If you're counting, that's a lot of commas and a lot of pain for a board that thought an email equals a deed. Discovery is a magical time if you've ever been wronged and you happen to have a patient lawyer. Emails have a way of telling the truth even when people don't want to, and maps, once submitted to the county, don't forget their shapes. What we found, and what the judge saw, could have been a case study in hubris. There were internal emails from Doug and two board members talking about asserting control through continuous use and pressure until the old ranch gave in. There were drafts of property maps with my boundary line nudged like a couch shoved a little farther into a shared hallway. There were permit applications listing Sunny Meadows as owner of a parcel that my dad's name sits on in black ink at the courthouse. There was even one line, bolded by the Lord for my personal enjoyment, that read, "The old ranch doesn't fit our aesthetic. Once we control the parking area, we can push for more." The judge didn't need a closing argument to get mad. The case never made it to trial because the HOA's insurance company saw those emails and those fake maps and those pictures of a bulldozer blade biting into a pasture, and they wanted out yesterday. We settled, not for pennies or for silence, but for a package that did more than stitch up a wound. They paid for everything they'd damaged and everything I'd had to do because they'd tried. New pasture seed, soil remediation where the machine tracked in, the heavier gate and reinforced posts, the hours of my time and Maria's time, and the sleep I lost wondering what comes through a cut lock at 2 in the morning. They paid a chunk for the stress and the way my stomach would tighten every time I heard tires on gravel. They signed a legally binding acknowledgement of my boundaries and a permanent injunction that said their board, and every board after them, has no authority over my land, period. They printed a public apology in their community newsletter, full page, no cute clip art, and Doug resigned. The county prosecutor opened an investigation into the permits, and before long, Doug and the treasurer were facing charges for falsifying documents. Sunny Meadows elected a new board who started their first meeting by calling Maria to ask how to make sure this never happens again. You want to know the best part? It wasn't the check. Although don't get me wrong, replacing a busted gate with something that could stop a small tank felt real nice. It wasn't even the injunction, though that paper sits in a frame above my desk next to a picture of my granddad leaning on the first fence post he set here. The best part was the morning a young couple from the subdivision knocked on my door with a pie their kids had helped bake, apologized for the mess, and asked if their little ones could meet the horses. I said yes, and we walked the fence line while I told them which grass was safe and which gate to never touch. Their boy reached a hand out and my mare breathed on his palm and flicked an ear, and I swear the whole place felt lighter. We put up a proper fence on the shared boundary, on their side, paid for by them, with private property markers so clear even a drone couldn't misunderstand. I installed cameras along the perimeter that ping my phone if a raccoon sneezes. The new board emails me now when they plan something loud, like 4th of July fireworks, so I can move the horses or play music in the barn to keep them calm. Most of the residents are just folks trying to live, the same as me, and when they understand where the lines are, they respect them. Every once in a while a newcomer will stop at the gate and ask, "Isn't this the community parking?" And I smile and say, "No, sir, never was," and point them toward the street with real parking signs and real authority behind them. As for Doug, he moved away, which is probably for the best. I don't wish him a bad life. I just hope the next time he thinks a logo on letterhead makes him king of someone else's pasture, he remembers what it felt like to stand in front of a judge while an email with his own words lit the screen. I learned a couple things in that stretch. First, the difference between neighborly and naive is about one cut lock. Second, there's a whole set of people who think community means everything I can see is mine to organize, and they move fast, and they speak with confidence, and if you don't say no in writing they'll hear maybe. Third, most people, when you look them in the eye and lay the facts out clean, will do the decent thing, and if they don't, that's why God made good lawyers and better fences. So here's where I'll leave it, and I'm genuinely curious what you think. Was the settlement enough, or would you have pushed it to a public trial just on principle, to make an example out of the board for the next HOA that gets cute with their neighbor's land? And where do you draw the line between community needs and private rights when the streets are full and the pastures are green? Because I'm telling you, those lines matter. And once somebody starts erasing them with a bulldozer, it's a whole lot harder to redraw them with a shovel. Drop your take in the comments. Right? Wrong? Too harsh? Not harsh enough? And if you've ever had to defend your fence line, literal or otherwise, I want to hear that story too.